chosen for your good judgment and ability to keep your team within safety limitations. Gabrielle, your task is to coordinate communications and navigation. Kang, take the risks and push the limits to the edge of safety while using enough judgment for the group to survive. You all must function as one integral team. Head to the ancient barge in quadrant 15K to learn of your final sensory training. You have been chosen to learn about flying in its purest sense. You will learn how to take off on 2 feet, climb to the clouds with the ancient eagles, and fly freely great distances using the forces of nature. You will travel back to the time of fun flying and freedom. Travel now to Earth. Experience the high alpine mountains that overlook a massive desert. You will go to the ancient and sacred Lake Tahoe. Time warp now. You will collectively take over the body of this pilot. You will be able to use his reflexes and instincts. You will be in control of the aircraft and responsible for the decisions. You can go into image sensory for more information when needed.
Up, forward, over, down.
This takeoff looks like a big step. Image sensory now.
Accelerate the glider into the relative airstream. Let gravity get you to the best glide speed as soon as possible. Pull in on the bar slightly to help you accelerate.
The takeoff was easy. I hope the landing goes good. I will use the standard approach to get in.
Downwind, base, and final.
Always look at the spot where you want to land. I wonder how I'm going to land this glider on my feet. Where does it stall? Image sensory now.
Bring it in fast all the way to the ground effect. Bleed off the speed until it feels mushy and the speed is just above stall. Then, push it out all the way to stop it. Learn from others how to journey up into the sky. Learn how to consistently defy gravity. Listen to the legends.
I didn't really start flying cross country until spent some time in Salt Lake City and got good at thermal soaring. When you're flying in the mountains, you can generally assume that if you fly into a certain part of the mountain, depending on the wind and the sun angle, that you can always find lift and climb out. And you can always wait there until you feel good about going on. On a mountain, what I'll do is I'll follow the ridge line down and try to fly over any pointy parts of the mountain which might trigger thermals.
This time, we thermal up. Clear. I'm flying through these thermals. They seem too small to stay in. I'm going down. Image sensory now.
Head for areas of the mountain that the sun has been heating up all morning. The best thermals are usually over the peaks. Lower to the ground, the thermals can sometimes be small, and you must bank it up hard to be able to stay in. If you were thrown out hard trying to enter the thermal, go with it and circle back 270 degrees directly into the center. Stay where you get the best climb rate. Enter the thermal zone.
I can now go into the thermal zone. Focus on the sound of the variometer to center the core of the thermal. These thermals are small. Bank it up and push it out to catch these little ones. As you get higher in the thermal, the diameter of the thermal often becomes larger. Now you can reduce bank angle to stay in the thermal, maximize climb rate, and go to cloud base faster.
The locals are going north to Mount Rose, where the clouds are. That looks like the best lift. Let's go. I agree with you that we are high enough. Let's go.
This mountain is shaped perfectly for thermals. It looks like we're going to cloud base. We made it to 17,000 feet. It's below freezing up here. We have entered the extreme altitude zone.
I am having trouble reading and making sense of my instruments. I think I'm hypoxic. We better find out why our human body feels euphoric. Image sensory now. The higher you go, the less oxygen there is to supply your brain. This impairs your judgment. You are now in the danger zone. The longer we stay at altitude, the more our human body is affected. We better go down to be safe. It looks like a thermal is just picking up here. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea of landing in the midday when thermals are booming.
Woo! Shit!
You know, I think it maybe is one of those built-in human responses in flying cross country. It's the adventure of going to the unknown. You don't know how far you're going to ultimately get on a cross-country flight. You're not sure where you're going to end up having to land. It's that sense of adventure, of exploration. You are exploring in the air uncharted territory for yourself if you're flying cross-country, particularly if you're going someplace where you've never flown before. If you've flown a known route, it still is going to be different every time you go. So that's, I think, the big draw of cross-country is that adventure, that sense of getting out there and doing something unknown.
Yeah, the actual aspects of the technical aspects of flying are really quite secondary to the emotional aspects of how you feel about the fears of landing in new areas or going behind a hill, or what the wind's going to do to you, what new terrain's going to do to you. You're going to be dealing with that good emotion, and you're going to be dealing with the fear of going to something that you haven't seen before. So it's that emotional balance that you start off with, I think, is the first thing you're going to be dealing with.
I'm just constantly looking at LZs going, okay, what happens if I sink out right now? And that's my biggest fear. Yeah, it's like I said, often the scariest things are the most thrilling.
Your first cross-country flight will be to the south, the legendary route down the northern Sierras. Your declared goal will be the last green meadow in the valley. Total air miles over 30. Set up your basic instrument parameters.
From the main menu, we select Setup menu to preset our altitude. From the Setup menu, we select altimeters. We then select Set Altimeters. Here we set altimeter A. I know our current altitude is 5,000 feet, which we find is already entered. So we keep this setting. We then go back out to the Setup menu and select Vario. We want to make sure our audio thresholds are at the correct levels. The lift audio comes on at 20 foot per minute up, and the sync alarm comes on at 600 foot per minute down. Checking the Vario averager, we see it is set to average over 20 seconds, which is about one circle. This is good. We make sure our glider polar is set for a high-performance hang glider, so we can get appropriate speed-to-fly calculations. The basics for effective thermaling and speed-to-fly are now set. You want a radio with accessible buttons, a viewable screen, and an easy push-to-talk button. Bring water and snacks, and an oxygen system for those high-altitude times.
Clear.
Head for the slide chute. It's known as the up zone. The soaring forecast said that the thermals will top out at 13,000 feet today. None of the other pilots are any higher. It's time to head south. We will cross this first gap and go for the spine.
There is only sync over this first gap. Reading 800 foot per minute descent rate initially out of the thermal, my flight computer tells me to fly 45 miles per hour for the best glide ratio through this sink.
We better find some lift here. I can still glide out to the valley.
We are getting low. Let's head out to the valley to be safe. We need to stay high on the spine. All the other pilots sunk out when they went to the valley. We need to risk it or we could go down.
I found something. The average reading on the flight deck says that we are maintaining as we fly in and out of lift, meaning there is a slight amount of rising air. Let's be patient and stay here since others are sinking out in the valley. At least we are not going down. Where there is up air, there is usually more up air close by. Be patient. Here we must get high to get past Marlette Lake and Carson City. Downtown Carson is not a good place to land. With cloud base at 13,000 foot today, we can get high at Snow Peak above Marlette Lake and make it over to the next valley. No lift since the last thermal. We are really low, just squeaking over Route 50. A long glide ahead over trees.
If we go for the safest glide over the trees out to the Green Valley, it looks like we could land safely. If we go back towards the mountain, we may get too low to make it out. If we want to go on though, we must risk it and head back towards the dark rocks. That's at least a potential thermal source. I'm glad I went back to the mountain and found that little tiny thermal near the rocks that turned into a big one.
From here, near Genoa, Nevada, we just need one more good thermal to get to Heavenly Valley ski area. We have made it to Job's Peak and Job's Sister, the southernmost mountains of the Tahoe Range. We will head out to our declared goal, the nice big green meadows.
The biggest danger is going to come down to that ground. You know, the ground is what hurts you. So always being prepared with a good, safe place to land. You know, always having that in the back of your mind, knowing that you might sink out at any minute, always ready to deal with it.
There's a danger, particularly in the desert here. If you land far from a road, retrieval may be longer. It may take somebody longer to get to you than you have water or the ability to survive. It's
in some very rough air, if something were to happen, I mean, you could be a long ways from anyone. How do I deal with that, though? I just keep going. I mean, it's just kind of a thought in the back of my mind, kind of like, oh, well, if something happened here, that would be not good. You keep going.
And having navigational
capability helps a lot.
I've got a GPS. I don't know how we flew without GPSs before. GPS is real important to tell your driver where you are if you're off a main road.
The goal today is further and more difficult. There are less landing areas. You will find it with your global positioning system. You will fly up the 120-degree west longitude line to 40 degrees north latitude. The goal again is a nice big green meadow.
Set up the GPS and plug into the flight computer. Mark the launch as a waypoint.
I am going north to Mount Rose. Once you leave Mount Rose to go north, there are no good landing sites, so I'm glad we are high and there are clouds ahead. Next possible landing fields are about 12 miles north of here, Verdi or West Reno.
I'm now 8 miles from Slide and not a landing area in sight. We're at 15,000 feet and we're going north. At my best glide, my airspeed is reading 35 miles per hour on my flight computer, and my ground speed is reading 55 miles per hour on the GPS.
Since the indicated airspeed is 35 miles per hour at 15,000 feet, the true speed through the air, considering this high altitude, is 44 miles per hour. That means I have an 11 mile per hour tailwind if my GPS ground speed is reading 55 miles per hour. We are cruising.
There's absolutely no lift over the gap. We have to dive for the south face of Peavine and find a thermal there. At least there's a golf course below the base of Peavine.
Concentrate. Focus on the sound of the variable. Go into the thermal zone. Think of nothing else. Focus only on the core of the thermal. Feel it near you.
There is sink all the way from the peak of Peavine headed out over the 395 highway. We are over White Lake with a border town landing area below. We must go for the foothills of Peterson Ridge to get lift. This Peterson Ridge is a freeway of lift. It faces the west afternoon sun and it's a 3,000 foot high ridge.
At the north end of the Peterson Ridge, it looks like we must go to the west to cross the 120-degree west line. We made it to the GPS coordinates with a nice big landing area.
As we do consistent circles into the landing area, I notice that we are drifting slightly to the north. We will land to the south, based on our slight drift to the north.
Country. I mean, I learned thermaling first from my dad, and we talked about, the dynamics of a thermal and how to turn in it. But I think really most of my cross-country learning would have been definitely in competitions. Just following the really good guys and just kind of watching them, and you figure out what works and what doesn't. It'd be like playing chess, I guess. It's just a lot of strategy.
It's a chess game that changes to checkers and back again. Decisions after decisions, and if you do those properly, if you make the right decisions, you will get there. Keep everything, a watch fly on everything if you can, and it's a lot of things to keep tabs of, but that's what I think the top competitors do.
Your final challenge will be to fly east out into the desert. You will fly with pilots in a cross-country competition. You will need to avoid huge airplanes from the Reno Airport controlled airspace. Competition is the ultimate cross-country challenge. Controlled airspace is all around the Reno Airport. If you fly straight east from Slide, you will miss the controlled airspace, but be in the path of the airliners, who usually have a north-south path, up and down the valley.
McClellan Ridge is another launch area to avoid some of the air traffic. It can also be used to launch if the prevailing wind blows from the west. It's on the east side of Washoe Valley, southeast of Slide about 9 miles.
A typical cross-country flight from McClellan is a takeoff with some flying around the mountain and the one thermal that takes you out of there. Notice the drift of the thermal in the wind and the long glide out of the first thermal out into the next thermal. This is classic cross-country technique.
Over the back of McClellan is hilly terrain where you do not want to have to land. So we'll make sure we're at least to 10,000 feet minimum before going over the back. This is the same route you fly from Slide Mountain. Once you've gone over McClellan, you can stay over the mountain range to the north or follow Highway 50. We will follow the highway since it's on a direct line to our first turn point.
We are on Route 50, 25 miles, bearing 80 degrees from Slide Mountain. The landmark is the Big Dry Lake at Stagecoach, Nevada.
Weather is building fast behind us, and we must keep ahead of the building storm. The edge of the cloud shadow is the edge we must ride.
We move on to stronger thermals where we see other gliders circling. Racing with the other gliders to the first turn point, we only stop for the strong lift. We let the leader show us our next thermal source. We have made it to the turn point at Silver Springs. We need to get high here before we go north.
We have reached our goal, just east of Fernley, Nevada.
There is a real defined line of shadow from the nimbus and sun in front of it. And if you got too far back, your lift would just die. And plus you're getting dangerously close to the gust front. So there's kind of a line to ride right about on the edge of the shadow. And at the end, I was basically doing a handstand on the bar trying to get down. And as I got closer, once I could see goal, you can adjust your glide, so that you can get within a couple 100 feet of it.
Thermals were popping off, and so if you stayed in thermals too long, the cloud would just overshadow and you'd have to run for daylight again. But it was hard going at first, trying to just stay high and safe, to have enough altitude to outrun it. It built pretty quick. I didn't think it would overdevelop. The cell would overdevelop that fast, but boy, you look back a second time and you're like, uh-oh, better get going. Even though you're not so high, you just got to go.
An aggressive dive into the mountains, thinking that it should work, diving, sinking, again down to about 800 feet off the mountains, and it worked. And from there, I was out of here. It was great. It was hang gliding racing.
Fortunately, at launch, I had like 500 feet of altitude on everybody just by paying attention to seeing where the best part of the core was, and kind of looking at everybody in the area made it easier. I was at 11 grand and I pretty much flew 40 all the way here, and then a few miles out I flew 60, and I was going up and my instruments were shaking off, my stuff was coming apart. It was just, I had to come over high. I couldn't cross low just because it was too big. This is like the Owens Valley out here once you leave the Tahoe area. Some of that activity I got across here was just enormous. I just, bar fully stuffed, getting bounced, beat up, going up.
You must now use your spirit and experience to journey to new places, free of the intense gravity holes.